Good evening, everyone. My name is Zali. Thank you for coming and thank you for this opportunity. I'm very excited to talk a little bit tonight. Hopefully, my story is interesting and hopefully, some people may learn something and get something out of this. I'm 23 and currently I'm living in Canberra. So, I work at a hospice at Clare Holland House for anyone who lives in Canberra. And I'm studying my master's in public health. I've always had like quite a big interest in health and helping others, which is why I've decided to make a career out of that. And outside of work and study, I really enjoy hanging out with my cats. That's one of my cats right there. Her name's Queenie. She's just loping in the background. And I really like plane spotting. I really love aviation as well, traveling, playing the sax, and hanging out with my friends. So, first, I'm going to talk about a little bit about my childhood. So at the age of 7, I started to notice symptoms of lupus, but obviously didn't actually know what they were and how all these little things were actually connected. The most notable thing I started to notice was always having really rosy cheeks, which you can kind of see a little bit in that photo. Um, I always had really sore and swollen wrists, as well as crazy fatigue. I was fatigued every day. I would get back from school and almost always have to take a nap, which turns out was not normal, and most people didn't do that. But all of these things together never really raised any alarm bells with me until I actually got my diagnosis as an adult. I also recall when I was younger, I used to get sick a lot, and I would feel really ill when I was sick, even if it was just like a common cold or gastro. Um, I always wondered how people would like manage to function so well when they were sick and why I would feel so sick. But I kind of always just put it down to me being a bit of a drama queen. And I was like, oh, maybe I just really hate being sick. Um, but yeah, so turns out it wasn't that case. Um, but yeah, growing up, I also had another huge barrier which affected me not getting diagnosed young, which is that I actually grew up across 4 different countries. So I was born in Perth and I lived there until I just turned 2. And then my family and I moved to Texas. We lived there for 5 years. And then after 5 years, we moved to Nigeria and we lived there for 5 years. And after those 5 years, we moved to Brunei and I lived there for 2.5 years and moved back to Australia when I was 14 and I went to boarding school. Safe to say I had quite the adventurous childhood. Um, and as I said before, I really love to travel. And I think having grown up in so many places really inspired me with that. But as much as the experience was amazing, there were times that medical care was really sparse. It also didn't help that our regular GP that my family would see was actually based in Australia, which for a lot of the time growing up, that was the other side of the world. So, and it also didn't help that we would really only go back to Australia once or twice a year. So I was only ever getting very basic checkups done as a kid at the GP, like once a year, even if there were kind of like multiple issues. It just kind of always got brushed under because we would kind of forget about them if it was like months before we would actually go and see the GP. But unfortunately, that kind of was the reality of living overseas. Um, but yeah, living in America, we kind of did have decent healthcare, but I was so young and a lot of my symptoms hadn't actually started then. So there wasn't really a cause for concern. It wasn't really until we were in Nigeria that I started to notice them more. Um, but Nigeria doesn't have the best healthcare, unfortunately. Um, the advice that was basically given to us while living there was if you could go to another country for medical advice. I even knew people who would get appendicitis and they would end up having to fly to either London or Johannesburg, which was 6 hours just to get their appendix taken out, because that was deemed more safer than actually having the surgery in Nigeria. Um, but yeah, so we would only really go to the doctors if it was just like a small immediate concern. One of the biggest things we would go to the doctors is if we started to feel unwell was to go get tested for malaria because that was quite common there. Or if we just needed antibiotics for like a sinus infection or ear infection or something like that, we would kind of go. But otherwise, yeah, nothing, nothing else really would be the norm to go see the doctor there. But thankfully, Brunei was a lot better in terms of medical care. We had some really great medical centers and doctors there. But because it was such a small country, it was very limited. A lot of the time, if you needed specialist care, you'd be flying over to Kuala Lumpur, which was a 2 hour flight and a bit out of the way. But I also found as well, when I was living in Brunei, being quite a young teen, my mental health wasn't the best. So my parents kind of put priority onto that, and other things kind of got pushed under the rug as well. And yeah, my parents were really, really like, oh, she needs help with her mental health. We're going to try and fix that. But I think later on, I kind of figured out that a lot of my anxiety was to do with me not actually being well. Yeah, so next I'm going to talk about how did I find out about lupus and what lupus was. So being part of Gen Z means that I am part of the chronically online community. So to no surprise, I had first heard about lupus through social media. I vividly remember seeing an article about Selena Gomez having a kidney transplant due to her lupus, and that was the first time I had heard of it. Over the next several weeks, it kind of just flooded my Instagram feed. It was everywhere. And I grew up watching Selena Gomez on the Disney Channel, so it was a huge deal to see her go through this. I also remember that her transplant brought a lot of light to lupus and what it was. And that's when I noticed some similarities with how I was feeling. I never really overthought it though. I thought I would be much more sicker than I was if I had actually had lupus, as social media really dramatizes a lot of diseases to make them seem like you're on the brink of death if you have them. So in my mind, lupus couldn't be mild like how I experience it. But this unfortunately wasn't really the start to my journey. But it was something that would pop into my mind from time to time and kind of make me wonder, like, there are similarities. Should I bring this up with someone? Should I not bring this up with someone? But yeah. Yeah, so next I'm going to talk about when I actually was diagnosed. So this was a few years later when I was 17. And in my final few weeks of school, I started to feel really kind of strange. It was almost like I wasn't feeling myself. I'm very disassociated with everything. And this is when I started going to my GP and trying to figure something out. Um, yeah, because for once in my life, I just wasn't really brushing it off as anxiety anymore. Deep down, I kind of knew something more was going on with me. I was constantly getting heart palpitations. I had really, really bad back pain, and I was so tired all of the time. There were days where I would sleep for most of the day. But yeah, so I kept on going back to the GP, and he couldn't really figure out what was going on. So it was just brushed off as anxiety, which unfortunately I think is quite common. Um, yeah, my diagnosis came after a year of going back and forth from different GPs and seeing if anyone could give me answers. Finally, my GP, who's now my current GP, decided to do a scan on my back, as I'd been experiencing really bad lower back pain for over a year at this point. The results, however, were completely clear. There was nothing that came up on the scan. So I went to the physio to help kind of get some exercises to relieve the pain as well as strengthen my back, thinking it may have just been that. And that's when the physio kind of went to me. She's like, you said you have issues with other joints. Maybe you should get tested for rheumatoid arthritis. So I had a GP appointment the day after that physio appointment. And I said to him, I was like, this is what my physio said. Do you think this is something we should look into? And he said, yeah, sure, why not? Doesn't hurt to test. So he tested for my rheumatoid factors as well as my ANA and just some of my like organ functions. And yeah, he called me in and said, oh, I think this could be lupus. And he was like, your ANA levels are quite high and your liver functions aren't great. He's like, these two could be related. So I got referred to a rheumatologist. So I went and saw the rheumatologist who then confirmed my diagnosis. So yeah, at the time I was only 18, and this was right at the beginning of COVID. So not really a great time to get diagnosed because the world was in flames already. Um, but yeah, so I also on the slide included pictures of myself kind of during that year. So I think it's really important to highlight that even though I was struggling, I looked okay. Something I know a lot of people with lupus kind of struggle with. no one would have looked at me in the streets at the time and known how much pain I was in or how unwell I felt at the time. At this time, I still started my first semester of uni. Um, I traveled, I worked, um, even though it was super, super duper hard. So I think seeing myself from that period of time is a great example of you never really know what's going on with someone just by looking at them. Because if you just looked at me, I looked like a healthy, normal human at the time, not someone who had any type of illness. Yeah, so next I'm going to go into working while sick. I thought I'd include this little photo from my current job. That's Hefner, the alpaca. He's become quite famous recently because he met the king, and he sneezed on the king's hand. But they did make a little article about him coming to my work. He comes and visits every Wednesday to come and see the patients, and he's such a well-trained alpaca. He knows how to sit and roll over. Didn't know you could train an alpaca like that, but he's a very sweet boy. But yeah, so I'm going to talk about my experience working while sick. Um, so it hasn't particularly been the easiest journey for me. It took me a while to realize that working in hospitality and retail was not a good fit for me. And I job hopped a lot when that was kind of the industries I was working in. Um, but it was quite hard while I was studying, as you only have so much time that you can put into working. So a lot of the time, casual jobs were the way to go. But a lot of casual jobs do fall into those fields. Um, but I am also thankful that at the time of studying, my parents were able to help me financially if I needed it, because that really did make the difference and put a little less stress on me. But yeah, as my undergraduate degree kind of came to an end, I realized that I needed to start working more and finding a career that's best suited for me because I had to make a living and support myself. Um, but yeah, my first few jobs in hospital and retail were really difficult on my lupus. I found it really hard on my fatigue and especially on my joints. I was at the physio all the time and I was just so physically and mentally exhausted from having to put my body through so much hard work. Um, Even with good shoes, I got to the point where where physically my feet were just like swollen at the end of every shift and so painful. Um, but yeah, so I kind of left the industry and was unemployed for a bit, which was difficult, but I found another job. So my next solid job was working in sleep medicine, but I was let go after 6 months as my health impacted my work a lot. I was getting sick a lot. I think just because of the stress, it was quite a stressful environment to work in, and it really impacted it and it impacted the business, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, a few months after I got let go from that job, I found my current job um, at the hospice, where I've been for almost a year now. And I never thought I would love working in such a challenging environment, but it has been my favorite job by far. I think part of that is to do with being so transparent about my disability from early on and making sure I have proper access to adjustments to make the workplace as inclusive as possible. I also think having a really tight knit and amazing team to work alongside has been a massive help. In saying that, there are still some struggles, such as having used all my personal leave really quickly due to illness, and missing work to attend appointments and struggling with tasks when I'm having a really bad and hard day. But thankfully, my work has recently implemented disability leave, which means I am entitled to 5 extra days off a year to attend appointments. And I also have had the opportunity to be part of the Disability and Carers Network. This has given me an opportunity to share my voice in matters that I think are important to help improve the experiences of those with a disability within ACT Health. It has been great working in such a supportive environment over the past year, and it has really changed my perspective on working with lupus. And yeah, I kind of want to talk about my transparency. Um, yeah, like how my transparency has helped me a lot too, especially as many people still believe that speaking out about having a disability can impact your chances on getting a job and affect how you're treated. And while this sometimes sadly does still happen, I think it's important to choose a workplace that is supportive of your needs so that you don't experience any type of burnout, as well as a workplace that sees you as equal to your peers. Your disability doesn't make you any less than those around you. So never let anyone make you feel that way. I was always very transparent about my disability from when I put my application in, and I feel that has helped me a lot within the job process and within working my job. So yeah, next I'm going to talk a little bit about studying while having lupus. At first it was really hard, especially because I changed degrees a few times. I started off in aviation and then I went to medical science, and then I decided to do a Bachelor of Science in the end. Um, but yeah, it took a while because I started uni in 2019 and got my diagnosis in 2020. So in 2019, I found I really struggled and I tried doing 4 units at one time and I just got so burnt out. So I took the second semester off. I just worked and then I went to Europe for a few months, just kind of tried to replenish myself and have a nice little break. And it was really, really good. But yeah, so I got diagnosed with lupus in my first semester of studying at the University of Canberra, which is where I ended up staying to do my degree. And that was really difficult. That was a very difficult first semester. But I'm really glad that the uni was super supportive of me at the time. Um, they have a really good inclusion and engagement section there. So I was able to get a reasonable adjustment plan with the help of my GP. Just went to my GP. He was able to fill out a form that they have where they basically kind of describe what adjustments I might need and confirm that I do need the adjustments. And the uni has been really good with it. It included me not having to do exams in like an exam hall. I could go into like a smaller room. It also included me being able to get extensions without having to get a medical certificate, which was really, really good, and came in handy a lot, especially when I was sick. And that would entitle me to a whole entire week extension without a medical certificate. All I'd have to do is fill out a form, and yeah, that was kind of it. It was a really quick and easy process. Um, and I also found that being at university, it's very different to school. I really struggled at school, and I think part of that was being sick without knowing it. Um, but I find uni wasn't as intense, thankfully. I think part of that was I was able to kind of pick how many subjects I wanted to study in a semester at a time, and I could drop subjects before a certain date, which was quite late into the semester, which gave me that flexibility. If I was feeling burnt out within a few weeks of the semester, I knew I could just drop a unit, and there was no financial academic penalties for that, which was great. But I kind of found like studying 3 units per semester was really ideal and helped me deal with my disability, my fatigue while I was studying. And I found that my results started to improve when I started pacing myself a bit better. But it also kind of gave me the opportunity to look into joining societies and groups at university, which really helped me as well. I was the vice president of the UC Supporting Women in STEM Society, and I was part of that society for a little bit, for about a year and a half. And then I was also the vice president of the UC Greens. And I think both were great because both I got the opportunity to really use my voice and talk about, disability, how it affects the community, and kind of help the uni shape the way that they deal with disabilities. But yeah, UC honestly was a very good uni for inclusion and engagement. I think they've actually been ranked #1 in Australia for diversity, which is great. And they have a really big culture of making sure that people with disabilities are heard and that the university is accessible. But yeah, and now I'm currently studying at the University of Melbourne, doing that online, but I've found them equally as great in terms of being able to help me with my studying journey. I'm only a semester in, so I don't have too much to say about it, but I found when I got sick earlier in the semester and needed an extension. It was super easy. The conveners have been lovely, and they're really big on making sure that you have all of the adjustments that you need. But yeah. So next I'm going to talk a little bit about the opportunities through my advocacy. So I've been really big on disability advocacy for a while now. And I kind of knew I wanted to use my voice. I love talking. So I was like, I feel like I'd be really great at this. But I never knew where to start. But the great thing is at UC, when I signed up to have that reasonable adjustment plan through inclusion and engagement, they would send us all these different opportunities for people with disabilities. And it was great because I would have never known about these opportunities unless they were sending these to me. So it's really great to learn about all these different things. So it first started when there was an opportunity to talk on a panel for correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the International Day of People with Disabilities. It's the perfect. um, so there was a panel for that at uni, and it was like a you can't ask that type of panel. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll sign up, see if I get selected, and I did, which was really great. And there was a great different kind of like variety of people on the panel, including carers, which I think was really great. So yeah, I got selected to be a part of that panel, and as well as that, the university asked me if they could interview me to write a story about my experience, which is great. So in the middle section of the photos there, it's the one furthest to the right. So yeah, they wrote a little article about my experience with lupus, and that was really exciting to me. I was like, oh, I'm using my voice to kind of talk about my experience and maybe show people that their experience is like they're not alone in their experience. So that's when I kind of got inspired. And then not too long after that, I received an email about the Australian Network of Disabilities internship, stepping into internship program. So I had a little look and I saw there was an internship here in Canberra through the Department of Infrastructure in aviation. And I was like, amazing, I've got to apply. And thankfully, I got it. And I got put into a team that was working on a women in aviation initiative. And it was great. We were basically working on how do we support young girls who have an interest in aviation and try and equalize the gender gap within the aviation industry. And I got to learn so much. I got to work for the federal government, which is a Canberran's dream, and it was an amazing time. They actually extended my internship as well, which was really cool and made me feel like, oh, I could actually do this. But yeah, I even got like the privilege to attend a Women in Aviation Summit. It was a huge summit, and they put me on this table filled with really important people. And I got to sit next to the CEO of the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, which was like crazy to me because I love aviation safety. I loved air crash investigation as a kid. It's my favorite show growing up. So yeah, it was great. Like, we were talking a lot, and I was like, oh, it was my dream to work at CASA as a kid. She was like, here's my email. If you ever want to talk, just send me a message. And it was just like so amazing. And it was great. After that internship, I became an alumni of the program. And there's like events and mentoring programs now that I have access to through them. Um, but yeah, and then after that, I also joined the US Embassy Youth Advisory Council. Um, I was part of their cohort last year, and through that, I like to use my voice a lot on kind of a lot of health issues because I was like, I have that lived experience. I also have kind of that educational background and work experience. Um, and yeah, I feel like I hope that my experience with my lived experience has been able to help shape some of the ideas that it's with the public relations team, but like kind of how they do things within their team. And then yeah, after that, I applied for another internship through A&D. They kind of tell you that you're less likely to get one after you've done one, but thankfully I got this one, and it was actually really cool because I got to use my lived experience as part of this journey. And basically, it was on consumer involvement in health research, and it was through UC. And me and another intern, we wrote a whole entire framework during this internship about involving consumers in health research and what's the best approach to do it. And it was great because I got to research so much about how important consumer involvement is in healthcare. Because honestly, before going into this internship, I didn't really know much about it. But once I left that internship, I was like, I'm going to involve consumers in every bit of work I do within healthcare. Like, this is so important. But it was a really amazing experience. We ended up writing like a 40-page framework that is now in the process of getting published for use within UC for researchers, which I think is kind of cool. Um, yeah. So, um, and then, yeah, I also got interviewed by the ABC. This is kind of the last experience I've kind of had within my disability advocacy about, yeah, outdated healthcare systems and how medical appointments are becoming too expensive for young people and how a lot of young people are avoiding appointments and buying medication because it's just so unaffordable, especially with the cost of living crisis at the moment. So that was another really exciting opportunity, and it was done by the ABC, and they never told me it was going to be on national news. I thought it was just local news, and my mum calls me up and goes, "You're on the TV," and she lives up in near Byron, and I was like, "Oh, you saw that on the TV?" I was like, "I did not expect that." So, but that was really cool that my voice was heard kind of nationally one night for this story, and I was like, "This is really cool." And they also posted an article about it. Yeah. Yeah. So next I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal life and how I balance my personal life while being ill. Um, as you can see from the photos, I really love going to concerts and festivals. I actually was up in the Hunter Valley this weekend seeing Hosier. It was amazing. But yeah, I really love doing things like that. I love hanging out with my friends, and I love traveling as well. It's a big thing. But I will say my illness has unfortunately kind of got in the way of all those things. Particularly travel. I haven't traveled overseas in a long time, which has been hard as someone who grew up overseas and has a lot of friends and even family overseas. Um, my health has kind of limited how I can do that because long haul travel is so stressful on the body. And then there's the worry if I go overseas, what medical access do I have? Is language barrier going to be an issue? Are they going to have my medications over there? So that's been a huge barrier, but I'm hoping next year to kind of push myself and travel. My plan is to go to Japan and Korea maybe for 2 weeks. So hopefully I'm able to do that. But it's one of those things I'm having to plan out and say, oh, okay, how am I actually going to do this without having any limitations that are going to impact me? Um, but yeah, I found for a while I avoided concerts and festivals as well and missed out on seeing some of my favorite artists. And I really love going to do these things because it's great for my mental health. And I love music. I grew up playing the saxophone and singing and just loved music. So for me, it's been really hard, like not being able to go to so many concerts. But at the end of 2022, I decided to break away from that fear of going because my favorite band came to Australia and I had an amazing time. I went, and I think one of my biggest fears is I love a good mosh pit, and but I'm really scared of catching something in the mosh pit because it is just germ central. But thankfully, I'm yet to get sick in a mosh pit. But yeah, I enjoy now going to concerts and I feel a little bit safer, but obviously take safety precautions when I can, like trying not to be too crowded within people and making sure I have my own space. And yeah, but yeah, and another thing I really enjoy is plane spotting. Thankfully, that's the most low key activity that I can do. I actually find it very relaxing on days that I'm not feeling well or if I'm really stressed. I find that I go sit behind, there's a big shopping mall out near the airport, and I like to sit behind there right next to the runway and I just watch the planes. And yeah, that's been really fun. And I think that's been like the easiest activity I've been able to do for myself and on my body and least impacts my lupus. But yeah, travel is probably the next thing that I'm hoping I can do, I guess, because my dad lives overseas and my mum lives up near Byron. My best friend lives in Brisbane. So, kind of to see these people, I've got to do a lot of travel and I've kind of been sticking to road trips. But again, having so much fatigue, road trips are so hard. You get to about 2 hours and you're like, oh my God, I need a nap already. So, it's been quite difficult trying to visit all my loved ones, but I'm hoping that I can come up with a plan to travel and keep my health within check while I do that. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening. I think if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. I think it has. I think it's opened more opportunities to find experiences and like do more research on my health. Actually, I'm in the midst of doing a clinical trial. Kind of, I'm in the testing phases to make sure I'm eligible for it. Um, but yeah, like, I would have never kind of found out about that if it weren't for all my advocacy and my connections as well. And this trial should hopefully help with some of my lupus symptoms, which is really cool. But also just meeting people and hearing what's kind of worked with people and being like, maybe I should try this. Because I think what I've found, and I think what a lot of people have found, kind of dealing with lupus, you've got to look at a holistic perspective. Like, you can't just look at the medications. Like, I look at what am I eating? What am I doing in my day to day life? How am I dealing with my stress? Because these are all things I've found really influence me and can cause flare ups. And I think talking to people has made me try out different things and kind of get to a point where I'm able to help improve my health better. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've been the type of person to have health anxiety for my whole entire life. And I think part of that was like, as I said, like that little voice in my head was just kind of repeating, like, oh, lupus kind of links up to some of what you deal with, kind of thing. And I think having that voice in my head and then like kind of pushing myself to go see the doctor when I realized things weren't okay definitely led to my diagnosis. And I don't think I would have ever really found out about those things if it weren't for social media. I think I probably would have just brushed it off as anxiety as well. Because I mean, anxiety can do some wild things to the body, unfortunately. So, um, yeah, I definitely think social media played a huge part in my diagnosis. And I think it's really kind of doing that nowadays. There's a Netflix documentary about it, people using social media to kind of find diagnosis when they are really just stuck and something's wrong. It's a really interesting documentary. I watched it with my mum a few years ago. Can't remember the name, but if you're able to find it, I highly recommend watching it. And it's really interesting. And I think social media can be toxic and the internet when it comes to health, because, you can go into WebMD and they're telling you you have some wild disease when it's not even close to that. But, I think it can be a really great tool in finding, kind of rare diseases, things that GPs aren't going to think about because they're always told, when you hear hooves, think horses, not zebras. Sometimes you are a zebra. I think a lot of us are here. So, um, yeah, and I think there is this kind of like toxic trait within medicine where people are like, it's never lupus, but sometimes it is, unfortunately. And I kind of wish there was a bit of a change within that as well within the medical field. Like, I've seen GPs since my diagnosis were like, are you sure you have lupus? And I'm like, rheumatologist diagnosed me. So I can't argue with a rheumatologist, and you probably shouldn't be either. It definitely is lupus. And I've even had, when I've gone to get my Plaquenil scripts, um, pharmacists be like, we're not giving this to you. And I'm like, why? I'm like, I promise I need it. Like, I have lupus. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. But yeah, so I think social media plays a really big role if used correctly. But there can be misinformation, of course, on social media and bad areas of social media with bad advice. I think it's good for investigating, but not necessarily taking medical advice. Yeah.